It's Wednesday, May 6th, 2015. I'm Jimmy Principe.
And I'm Trey Comstock, putting your final orders because this is Tech's Last Call, episode 114, your last call for tech news of the week. Tonight, Jimmy investigates some drones for the FTC, and I launch into space on my overly delayed Oculus Rift. But we start tonight with Apple getting into some trouble.
Trouble. So, Bloomberg is reporting that Apple is under the watchful eye of the United States Federal Trade Commission regarding their acquired music streaming service, Beats Music. So the concern is that Apple, the largest seller of music downloads, is unfairly leveraging their market position to, quote, put rival music services like Spotify Limited at a disadvantage, end quote. So one of the questions that the FTC is apparently asking is whether Apple is working to change the existing relationships between the music labels and the other streaming services, such as Spotify, doing things, like reducing music available on the ad-supported tiers and kind of pushing more of the content, like, Taylor Swift stuff, to the paid tiers. Reports were that Apple had planned to announce the service at WWDC in June, but that they would need all of the labels on board before they announced, which they don't have. So, Trey, do you think that Apple would, violate the Sherman Act and do something anti-competitive just because they're the juggernaut in the market?
Well, I think that's what juggernauts in the market do. I mean, the Sherman Act exists because that's what juggernauts in markets do. Is they kind of take advantage of the fact that they're bigger than everybody else and try to do things. Now, that's where it becomes the issue is, are they going to sell at a loss? Are they going to dump in a market in order to gain a market position? Now, that's what the Sherman Antitrust Act is actually worried about. That and collusion.
Collusion is the bigger thing.
Yes, but the music labels don't like Apple. Right? So now the music labels have this really weird thing where they don't like anybody, right? They don't like Spotify and Pandora because they thought they were making so little money with Apple. They didn't realize that
it could only get lower.
They could only get lower, that their real enemy was the streaming ones, and Apple's kind of their hedge against the streaming ones. And so now you're in this really weird situation where they don't like Apple because Apple ruined CD sales. But they don't like the streaming services because the streaming services ruined individual MP3 downloads. And so who are they going to like better?
Created by Apple.
It was a market very much, not entirely, but very much created by Apple.
Well,
and they kind of got dragged kicking and screaming into it, and they tried to they set up Amazon as a hedge against Apple, and that's how Amazon got DRM first, for instance, was to try to take some of it out of Apple. And now they're in this scenario where Apple looks like their friend, but what Apple's doing is just like the rest of them. They don't like this streaming stuff.
I think that the interesting news is that whole trying to push stuff into like a paid tier, which I don't even know how a service like that would work. Okay, you can listen to whatever music for free you want as long as it's not like, a top 100 artist.
Hey, Jimmy, you ever been on Hulu Plus?
Not for any longer than 1 month.
It's going to be like that.
It's hell.
I mean, that's the model, right? It's
right.
Hulu Plus. You can get some of this stuff for free, sure. But the stuff you really want is just behind, most of these services kind of work that way, right? I can get a little bit of MLB.TV for free, but what I really want is locked behind the paywall. And so I pay an ungodly $25 a month throughout the baseball season to get MLB.TV. Now, me being me, I think I get value in that. Maybe I don't. Even like GiantBomb.com, right? This is my, go-to streaming gaming website. They have some, and actually, they're really good about it. They have a lot of content for free. Maybe more content that you could watch in a week for free. But their really cool shows are locked behind a reasonable $5 a month paywall. I think they're doing it well. This isn't actually a scree against Giant Bomb, but this is not an uncommon model. It's Apple, I guess the issue is Apple trying to force companies
Yeah.
into that uncommon model.
Basically
Not uncommon
saying
model.
that because Apple has made this deal, then Apple's like, okay, we'll make this deal, but then you have to revise your deal with Spotify and with, you know, whoever, Google Music, Xbox Music,
Right.
all the streaming services in order to raise the bar a little bit. And I think that that's going to be a difficult thing for. I think that if something comes out like, oh, all of a sudden now Spotify is locking some of their stuff behind the paywall. Spotify is only growing at the rate that they are because of their free, ad-supported service.
Right.
So much so that they've been making their ad-supported service available on more and more devices because they realized that people weren't paying for the mobile device access.
So
They'd
okay.
rather.
Yeah. Interesting theory, but I think what Apple's trying to do is trying to reset that by
Right.
not offering, by setting up this freemium model.
Well, and I
where-
think that Apple will do that, but I think that if you see Spotify, so Apple is going to go for something where they can get a recurring amount of money from a user.
well, maybe.
Most likely.
Remember, Apple isn't a music company.
Right, that's true.
Spotify is at a disadvantage in this because what Spotify is trying to sell is Spotify. What Apple is trying to sell are iPhones, which, by the way, has made them the largest, most valuable corporation in history in competition with the Dutch East India Company in terms of its total valuation. Okay, let's put that in perspective. This weird, government-owned entity hundreds of years ago and Apple are of roughly equivalent value. The whole spice trade, iPhones.
The whole iPhone trade.
It's
kind of the same.
just put this in perspective. What we're witnessing is
The East Indies were very important in both of those markets.
you're not wrong. Oddly enough, you're not wrong, and not just for tech support. That's a bad joke.
That's really bad.
Really bad joke. I realize the East Indies are not India. I know that. Also, with our new software, I really can't bang on the table. It really picks it up. Thank you, Adobe Audition. Anyways, Apple's not trying to sell you music. So Apple, it's always weird because their music service and their TV service and their services are iCloud too, are in service of pushing devices. It's that tight integration between service and devices. And they make so much money off of the App Store and so much money off of iPhones that it's strange to me that they're not going after a free tier. You know what would be crazy? If Apple Music, whatever this streaming thing is, which has got to be better than the radio solution they have now, which I don't ever use. You know what would be crazy is that they launched it ad-free with exclusives for free. And they can do that. Also, they could just buy Spotify, would make this somewhat a moot point.
Yeah. That would would solve their problem.
And why they haven't fascinates me, right? Apple, with the cash they have on hand, could buy half of the tech industry, right? They have $240 billion set aside or something crazy. And Spotify is worth maybe 3% of that. Maybe it's a $6 billion company. I don't even know.
I was listening to, I want to say it was Tech News Today, and one of the things that was thrown out there is that Apple could buy Spotify, Pandora, and all three of the music labels, and probably have some money left
Uber.
over.
I think Uber was in there too.
Yeah, and probably have some money left over.
Right.
With their cash on hand.
And the NFL. Apple could buy literally anything at once. Apple has always been. Apple very seldom buys big ticket items. They buy a bunch of small companies. And they get technology they need. That's how they got Siri, for instance. That's how they got the fingerprint stuff. They buy into, or that's how they got the ability to make their own chips. Same idea. They bought a chip making company. Oh, I forget the name of it. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I would love to see
now.
Apple buy It ended in semi. This is why this doesn't matter. I would love to see Apple buy Spotify. I would also love to see Apple buy Nintendo, but I get that that's not going to happen. Apple, we think of Apple as the 800-pound gorilla in whatever market they walk into. But it comes to streaming music, they've had the ability to do it for so long and have not been able to lock down the deals for so long. This goes back long before Spotify was in the U.S.
I think that's because they don't want to do ad-supported, which I think is why all of the rumors surrounding this surround the ad-supported tier of Spotify and what Apple might do to that tier.
What Apple might do by proxy to that tier.
Well, or directly. We go back to the Amazon case that was just recently settled where Apple was found guilty of colluding with the book publishers of setting prices so that Amazon couldn't just say, well, it's going to be $9.99.
Right. And I mean, I think they're trying to do the same thing again, and I'm not entirely sure why. They already own a huge chunk of the music industry, right? They didn't own a huge chunk of the book industry. They were trying to break into it. I get that they're trying to really break into the streaming market, with the power of Beats music. It was not a great app. It wasn't a great app. It had that really kind of what is it? The sentence?
Yeah, it was the sentence.
Oh god,
it was just cool for about 5 minutes.
We had a pretty good fun with it on the show, but I could not build a sentence that actually applied to me.
That actually made music that you wanted to listen to.
I have Beats. I could go on Beats and pull up the late '90s, early 2000s pop punk that I really want to listen to, which I get is horrendous. But so a player we haven't mentioned in this discussion, then we should probably move on, is Tidal. This is Jay-Z's.
And Tidal is really the problem for the exclusives for Apple.
Sort of, but they haven't locked up a whole lot of meaningful ones. Apple could also buy Tidal, which would be funny that they buy Beats and Tidal, Dr. Dre's project and Jay-Z's project.
I don't think Jay-Z would sell out to Apple, though. That's the only difference.
But at some point, Jay-Z has shareholders. I mean, hostile takeovers are a thing. They don't always have to agree.
That's true.
I mean, if you,
I think at this point with Tidal that he's safe, but only for now. But yeah, I think that Tidal kind of threw a monkey wrench in it because it was the message of Tidal was the artists kind of taking back their interests from the labels because the artists more than the labels are the ones that are really getting screwed in this.
The small artists are the big artists who can tour are getting theirs. Jay-Z's not hurting, right? But
no, nor is Beyonce.
Nor is Beyonce, blah, blah, blah. I mean, none of those folks are hurting, but I think the principle's interesting, right? Taylor Swift is going to be fine because what she does and what Gaga does is they are a brand, right? And they are able to market themselves as a brand. So Taylor Swift's making a ton of money off of Diet Coke, right?
Yeah, let's talk about advertising.
Right. Product placement, all of these things, tours, all of these things that the big artists can make tons of money doing, that they're already less dependent on record sales. They had to get less dependent on record sales because of iTunes and Pandora a long time ago. That being said, the small artists who are actually, determined on record sales, I think Tidal is theoretically for them.
So the small indie artists?
Right. Small indie artists, or maybe not even indie, but the ones that the labels don't care about. That maybe the labels have picked up, but they aren't really pushing. Who need to carve out their own way in the world and can't make their money off of all the ancillary stuffs. Merch and tours and product placement and blah, 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 right? And appearances and, Kim Kardashian makes her money promoting parties, right? Like,
I'm sure. Whatever.
Hey, look.
Wearing clothing.
Right.
Or not wearing clothing. Whatever.
That's how it started. Let's be clear. That's how it started. Was Kim Kardashian not wearing clothing. And on that note, we are leaving this topic behind. I clearly cannot communicate about streaming music services appropriately.
Yeah, when you have to talk about Kim Kardashian and streaming music in the same sentence,
Well,
you're in trouble.
she's married. I'm told she's married to Kanye, and Kanye, love Yeezus or hate him. He can make some music, and quote Nietzsche fairly effectively. Hey Jimmy, good news.
Is it the Dacia Sandero?
No, the Oculus Rift has gotten a release date of Q1 2016. So,
woo!
my prediction of an Oculus this year is blown. And if everything stays on track, Oculus VR, who sort of created this market, will be beaten to market by Microsoft HoloLens and the HTC Valve Vive.
Vive.
The Vive. Yeah. If you're keeping score at home, this is Gabe Newell 1, John Carmack 0. In their blog post...
Let's check out the big board.
Yeah. In their blog post announcing the full consumer version, they promised a complete software library, improved head tracking, and both a standing and a seated functionality. The preview images of the consumer version do look better, although still like you're wearing a gigantic thing on your face. You can't... I mean, I'm told that's the concept. It's all supposed to have better ergonomics. No exact pricing yet, but they say we'll be able to pre-order it this year and take delivery of it before the end of March next year, which is when Q1 ends. In addition, Oculus co-founder Nate Mitchell was on stage at TechCrunch Disrupt New York, and he confirmed that the Oculus Rift will require a gaming PC that can run quote-unquote modern games, and that the Rift will be priced significantly higher than the $200 Gear VR. They're aiming it as more of a premium experience. Editor's note: TechCrunch treated this as news for it needing a gaming PC. This was somehow a surprise. It isn't.
We've known that all along.
End editor's note. My question to you is not, will it be any good? Because I think they've proven it's pretty good. Especially if it does have better screen resolution than the current preview model. But are they just going to be a little late to the party? They're going to be coming out right along the same time as Project Morpheus.
Yeah, I think that they're definitely going to be coming a little late to the party. But of course, that'll determine on how good the HTC hardware is.
Yeah, and also how extensive Valve's game library is.
But it's Valve though, so Valve has somewhat of an advantage going into this because they're used to working game deals and doing their own first party stuff. That's usually pretty cheap.
But yes, that's true. But Oculus has Facebook money to pour into software development. They're promising a full suite of apps, a full VR focused suite of applications.
The biggest word though is whether or not Oculus is how you're going to control the thing has been the question all along,
and that's
still a giant question mark. Which most likely will be E3.
Yeah, they're going to talk. Everyone's saying E3 is coming. No joke. It's a month and a half away, right around my birthday. Happy birthday to me. Again, I'm moving the week after E3. This is nightmare scenario. One of these years we should go when I'm not moving the week of E3. That would be great, because that to me that's one of the last trade shows that really matters.
Yeah, I agree with you.
CES, we went and it was good, and we learned something, and we learned maybe we don't need to go to CES.
Never again.
So here's the scenario that I want to see, that I want to see play out. I want Gabe Newell to get up on stage at E3 and say, Half-Life 3 is coming. It is exclusive to the HTC Vive and the Steam VR platform. And I want, John Carmack and the Oculus team to get on stage and show all of these new IPs developed specifically for Oculus and VR that they have been working on in secret and that they've been kind of teasing are coming. And I want us to sit here and go, oh my gosh, there are all of these historic game franchises and exciting new IPs that are all coming out for VR. VR is meaningful. That's what I want. And then I want Sony to get on stage and say that the new Gran Turismo game that is coming out for PS4 is best on Project Morpheus, and here's why. This is what I want, right? And that would be an amazing E3. That would be a great 2 days of press conferences. We're just going to sit here and go, this is the future. We've accomplished something. This is not the 90s all over again with Johnny Quest Virtual World. This is something that we can really wrap our heads around. These are the games we want to play. And then I think VR's made it, especially with Half-Life 3.
But I think that you're jumping the gun there a little bit. I'm going to be surprised if we see that level, anywhere near that level of VR pimping, for the lack of a better word. Yeah, just because
all three of these products are coming out within a year after E3. E3 is the event. They were already showing, there were already demos of the products at GDC, which is a pretty good indicator of what we're looking at going into E3. Microsoft's going to be pushing the gaming applications of HoloLens. There isn't a new console on the horizon except the Nintendo DX, which we already know isn't going to get talked about at the Electronic Triple. I think this is VR's year, right? In the same way that motion control had its year, and it wasn't good.
Sold a lot of Wii's.
Because the games are crap. And the hardware overpromised and underdelivered, which it sounds like HoloLens might be doing as well. Paul Farad, this is last week. It's a real narrow field of view.
Yeah.
It works. It does.
Basically, a TV is kind of the description that I've heard.
The bit that you can see, it is all that crazy stuff you saw in the demo. Like, that works. It does. But in a very narrow field.
Yeah, they need to widen the field of view.
To me, if these things are coming out, if these things are going to be priced in that $500 price range, that they may well be, they need to sell it with games now. And it's going to have to be something on the level of Half-Life 3 is VR exclusive. Because you do that, and then there is an already pre-existing market for
that
the
will
HTC
just
Vive.
buy it.
They'll just buy it.
They're like, Half-Life 3? Yes, I'm done.
I will make you buy it, but you will buy it.
I
Side
want a
note,
HoloLens.
there is no way in hell I'm going to be able to get into these VR headsets, right?
You're
can't
just
play
throw up all
normal first-person shooters on a television. Like, there's no way. I'll have to try out the driving games, maybe. But God, I think HoloLens is the device for me. I think the rest of this is going to be motion sickness city. But it's all about the games. And that's what Oculus has been saying for months now, right? They said back in November, like, look, the hardware is basically there, but the app library isn't. And that's why we've been waiting, is for the app library to be there. And so... Yeah.
And Oculus has been pushing this, like, we're going to deliver a complete product, not just a thing that doesn't really have, like, a point when we release it. Yeah, well, exactly. That's why they keep releasing these things to developers, because they're like, we know that some of you want to play with this thing, so we're going to release it to you, and then you give us feedback on what you want to change about it, and we'll change it.
Right.
And therefore, we haven't, made the entire consumer marketplace upset at us.
Right.
So I think that this is going to be the Android Wear versus Apple Watch. Yeah, Android Wear got there first, but if it's just crap, it doesn't matter that you got there first.
Well, I think if any of these are going to succeed besides Oculus, it's the Vive, right? Because you have Valve, who knows games, right? And they've have their own VR division that's been working on this thing. And they have their own in-house developers and developers like them. So if there is going to be, like, cross-platform games, they're going to be on Valve's thing and on Oculus's thing, right? And ideally, you don't want competing standards. We want this result to resolve into things just run, right? That's what you really want. You have Oculus, who's been around longer in terms of the VR game, and who's now backed by one of the more valuable companies in the tech space, who seems fairly committed to this in that I think they want to create the Oasis, and that's really the killer app, right? Is
the Oasis?
The Oasis. I mean, read Ready Player One. That's in terms of required reading for the show. Ready Player One's this kind of immersive, all-encompassing digital world. By the way, Sony has some experience with that. They made PlayStation Home, which they recently shut down. I should have predicted the return of PlayStation Home. You can go home again, this time in VR as the Oasis. Great. Yeah.
Good talk.
Good talk. So drones?
Yeah, so soon commercial drones could be out of sight, out of mind. The FAA today announced...
Will they take me home again?
They will take you home again to the Oasis. They announced industry partnerships that seem to signal kind of an easing of the drone restrictions proposed back in February that would require drones to be within the line of sight of their operators. Now, these partnerships are for projects with two different companies. The first one is with the drone manufacturer Precision Hawk that wants to test drones that are for crop monitoring and apparently have some kind of like, Roundup in them.
Right, yeah.
Basically, I'm translating. And the second one is with BNSF Railroad to investigate what it would take to check on
railroads,
because they're a railroad company. Commercial
Burlington,
use of drones.
Northern Santa Fe.
Is that right?
BNSF is Burlington, Northern Santa Fe.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You didn't take railroading merit badge.
I did not take railroading merit
did.
badge. That's true. So commercial use of drones is still illegal, as railroading merit badge should be, unless specific
truck
exceptions.
Transport is the one that should be illegal because you can't drive a truck. So what's the anyways?
It's true. That is true. So unless specific exemptions are granted by the FAA, though they did make non-commercial drone use easier with the implementation of a new app, cleverly B the number 4 U fly.
So before you fly.
Before you fly.
Before you fly.
What the app does is it allows private drone owners to check if drone usage is restricted in their current location.
That's reasonably clever.
So Trey, really the only thing I care about is how long until I can get Amazon drone deliveries. Like,
okay, so you realize
they have an exception, by the way.
Okay. Do you really want drones delivering packages? So think about the logistics of this for a second.
Well, it would be terrible when, the old man with the shotgun shoots the drone out of the sky.
That's not even what I'm worried about. How does the drone set the package down?
It drops it.
Or it lands. Or it's flying towards your front door and then stops. But what if you open your front door as the drone's arriving? You think like running into the mailman as you're walking out of the house is kind of awkward. Imagine let's call it a 200-pound drone, is hurtling towards your face, and it's very precisely calculated it's going to stop at the door. Well, what if you are where the door is supposed to be? I get, right, that and there was a story that we didn't talk about this week of like a driverless 18-wheeler. Great. Something the size of a freight train hurling down the road at 80 miles an hour, controlled by the robots.
Hey, it can stay in its lane and maintain following distance, unlike actual truck drivers.
Yeah, but so can my cat on some level. I mean,
your cat can land on all of its feet all of the time. That's a good trick.
Normal operation is not the concern with the drones. It's the edge cases, right?
Right.
And Jeff Kanata, also, when he was on Daily Tech News Show, raised a good point about the truck drivers, and to a certain extent, getting rid of...
I really liked his argument.
Getting rid of delivery vans, too, is the same way. Like, we kill thousands of people a year on the roads. I make this point every time someone freaks out about the 8 people that die from Ebola or whatever. And that's a tragedy. All death is a tragedy. But keep in mind that we kill like 10,000 people a year on the roads. Almost 500 in the state of Georgia already this year, and we're only 5 months in. Right?
Or I think we're in the thousands in Texas.
Well, Texas is the size of France, and there are a lot more large vehicles. So it's both
I'm doomed if I end up in an accident on a highway.
Size problem and a scope problem. Anyways, there's a lot of issues with that. But we're killing thousands of people a year, right? We'll probably kill 1,000 people in Georgia this year, just in road fatalities. Driverless cars and drones taking cars off the roads are ways to prevent the fatalities. I can make jokes about drones flying at your head all day long, and probably will, because it's kind of funny. But the fact is that's one fewer delivery van that's driving. Those things are large, heavy, difficult to control. They're being driven by very professional drivers who are well-trained and all of that, but at some point physics takes over because the non-professional driver made a mistake.
And that's usually what it is. The professional driver is trying to make a correction because someone cut them off or
right, and those things
whatever.
are, either the size of mobile homes or the size of freight trains, and they're not maneuverable. And so if we can get all of these things controlled by robots or lifted into the air with drones, I think that's a positive thing. The issue is people don't think like that. The minute a machine makes a mistake and kills one person is way different than the hundreds and thousands of people who we kill. Apparently, we're less worried about the humans that humans slaughter, and this is universally true, the humans that humans slaughter, and more interested about the few mistakes that machines make.
Well, and the argument that Jeff Kanata made was that one day our children or our grandchildren are going to make the argument to us, wait, people used to drive cars? You let people drive cars. Yeah. Well, surely people died. Oh, yeah, thousands. Thousands of people died. It's like, yeah, that's barbaric. How could you do that?
To put this in perspective, we'll kill more people on the roads this year alone than soldiers who have died in Iraq and Afghanistan, plus all of the deaths of 9/11 in 1 year alone. The whole scope of human tragedy that has been the war on terrorism. This isn't a political judgment on the war of terrorism. These are numbers, right? All of the soldiers who have died, coalition soldiers who have died, plus the number of lives killed in 9/11, will not equal the number of lives killed in the United States this year in road fatalities. Think about that for a second. And on that really cheerful note,
well, I was gonna sum up with the fact that the FAA appears to be like really proactive about this kind of stuff.
Finally,
so they're responding to public comments currently on the stuff from February, but they're already kind of like going, okay, well, we figured out what you don't like about that, so we're going to try to change that. And
I like the app idea. I think that's back to the actual story in hand. That's pretty clever.
Before you fly.
That's pretty stupid.
But clever. The app itself is pretty clever.
The app is like, yeah, you make it simple. It's a way of cutting through some red tape in a meaningful technological way. This is really tech forward for the United States government. Though you'd think they'd understand how drones work.
They don't understand the drones that don't kill people.
They're not really good. I mean,
they would want the drone to run you over with the package. They don't understand the drone that stops before it gets to you.
It's really weird that they're over-regulating commercial drone use when they're the largest deployer of killer drones in human history. And that's not true. If you count the V-2 rockets as drones, which they are, it's Hitler still. But you get my point. Like,
that only took one step. U.S. government, Hitler.
With the U.S. government, that's not far. So in the interest of being fair and balanced, and a slightly more positive story about the U.S. government, it's this week's Space.
Space, the final frontier.
So, American manned spaceflight got one step American-made manned space flight got one step closer to reality today.
Wait, we already did that.
Yeah, but then we stopped. And unlike this show, when they stop, I worry that it may not come back. The human-piloted version of SpaceX's Dragon capsule underwent a successful test of its launch abort system at Cape Canaveral today. Unlike the shuttle, NASA is requiring all of its new spacecraft, the SpaceX-1, the Boeing Fairy craft, and the Orion Deep Space craft, to be able to safely abort a launch at any point during the launch, from just after liftoff until orbit, by blasting away from a failing booster rocket. This is to prevent the shuttle tragedy, one of the shuttle tragedies.
Challenger.
No. Yes, Challenger.
Yes, the one that blew up in midair.
Yeah, that was midair on the way up. Columbia was on the way back.
Right.
That was a failed heat shield. Anyways, SpaceX does this with 8 Super Draco rockets with a total of 120,000 pounds of thrust. This moves the 8-ton craft from 0 to 100 miles an hour in 1 second. The test today used only those rockets and launched the 8-ton capsule 4,500 feet in the air, with a sensor-packed dummy inside to test the effects on humans. Though it said it only pulled about 5 Gs, and I've pulled 4 Gs in a centrifuge. So we're not. Sounds impressive, but you humans can stay conscious past 10 Gs for brief moments. It's fine. Further tests need to be run, but it seemed like it all went well. So is this the beginning of a glorious age of commercial spaceflight? Is it? Are we back? Are we back? Is this spaceflight? I'm hopeful. I want this to work. Partly, it's the age of the Soyuz spacecraft. Partly, it's we were in space, and that was great. And we're still in space, but we're not going to get back to kind of truly epic space flight without actually having our own rockets. This seems like it's important.
Having our own rockets?
Having our own rockets seems like important.
And I mean, I like that they're called Super Draco rockets on this one.
That's pretty exciting.
Although, you have to wonder, did they come from Harry Potter, the Draco?
I couldn't tell. I think it's all the dragon.
All the dragon stuff.
It's all like, dragons. That's their thing. It's the Dragon capsule.
It's their shtick.
And, it's nice that, SpaceX got like a $2.6 billion grant to do this. Boeing got like $4.2 billion to do theirs. And theoretically, Orion is still a thing. It's at least nice to hear that Orion is still a thing.
They talked about it when I was at the Space Center 6 months ago, so.
I mean, it should write home more often. I feel like I never hear from it. And it's my tech.
Or be like ET and phone home.
It's the only part of my tax dollars I care about that aren't like feeding people or education or healthcare, right? Like that part of my taxes I care about, and the bit that goes to space exploration. I really want us to go to Mars. Apparently, if you go to Mars, you aren't coming back. That's problematic. But
I thought we were all about Moonbase 2020.
But I am about Moonbase 2020. I'm waiting. The election season here in the United States is ramping up. It's almost game time for the fight for 2016. I want to see who's backing the space platform, because that will be interesting. For at least I hope someone does. Something else that I am appreciating the return of is this week's Last Call.
So in the most hotly anticipated gaming news of 2015, Snake will make its triumphant return to phones next Thursday. That's right, the game will be called Snake Rewind and be available on iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. Now, the new version of the game will be designed by the original creator of Snake for the Nokia 6110 in 1997, Taneli Armanto. He's Finnish. Probably doesn't talk very much. It will keep the
Very
same look.
organized, though.
It will keep the same look that we all know and love from the original game, with some new power-ups and levels, which really doesn't matter to me because I never made it past level 2.
Really?
I was never very good at Snake.
Apparently not.
And I didn't get, anyways. So my question is, will Snake lose some of its charm without having the physical keys to play it on?
Yes, of course it will. This will be terrible.
Everyone will download it in a rush of nostalgia, and then no one else
Remember
will.
what Saratoga Iwata said about not bringing Mario, just straight porting Mario to phones, because that would be terrible, because it was so integrally designed to the physical nature of the button inputs and those kind of things? It's going to be like that.
See, Snake was originally a phone game, so I think that...
Yes, but there's a difference between being a phone game and working on a modern phone. Those are two different devices. Modern phones aren't phones. They're the natural evolution of PDAs, not the natural evolution of the Nokia 6110. Right? That lineage has just sort of died out. What made it isn't iPods and isn't phones. What made it are Palm Pilots. Right? This game, Snake wouldn't have worked on a Palm Pilot either.
Right. Battleship was great on the Palm Pilot.
And Minesweeper probably would have been alright too. There were decent games on the Palm Pilot. I had a Palm for years.
Minesweeper would not be a good touchscreen port though, because the little you'd click and you'd hit the wrong button and
God. You need the stylus. It would work great on the Microsoft Surface. By the way, Minesweeper might be coming back in Windows 10.
Really?
Solitaire is coming back as a default game in Windows 10.
Oh,
I can't remember if Minesweeper was included in that. I'm excited about it because I have nostalgia for it, but it's also going to be terrible.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just awful.
Oh yeah.
There's no way that this goes well. So just as long as we're all okay with that, congratulations, world. It's another turd served up by touchscreens. And on that note, it's time
Show
to end.
title.
It's another turd served up by touchscreens.
I got it.
If you have any feedback or want us to talk about stories that we have possibly ignored in the month and a half that I have been buried by other things and could not podcast at textlastcall.com, facebook.com/textlastcall, pinterest.com/textlastcall, or at textlastcall on the Twitters. However you find us, we'll be seeing you on the interwebs. I fixed the effects volume problem.
With your fancy new software, I'd hope so.
No, this was a hardware problem.
Ah.
But I fixed it. And that's what really matters.